another episode of Careers Night. This is the podcast where we ask our guests two simple questions. What's your job and how did you get there? My name is Chris Potts, and I'd like to thank you for joining us and giving us your time to join this conversation today. Today's episode's a brilliant one and one that was incredibly powerful and impactful on me, to the extent that I recorded this some time ago, and it's taken me a long time to build up the confidence, I guess the courage to do it justice and to start with a personal story. So I wanted to do that as a complete aside, and I thank you for the patience and tolerance to join in on this part and to stick with me. But it's important to me that I articulate this to just contribute to this conversation, I guess, the undercurrent to what we explore in this episode. And so the story is that going back when I was at school, in year 8, I remember we were studying a book. It was one of Shakespeare's plays, and I remember trying to contribute to one of the conversations and using a racial term that I thought at the time and believed to be a quote from the book that was immediately replayed to me that was an inappropriate expression to use. And while there was no sort of underlying militia with it, there was no intent to be inappropriate, I remember the shame and the embarrassment that I felt, particularly to hear later on that I overheard a conversation between some of my fellow students, and one of them was telling someone else about the fact that I had done that. And I just remember being absolutely mortified that I had accidentally used an expression or a word that had caused harm and hurt to people. For me, that was a very strong influence for what later became a theme through my life as to avoiding these sorts of conversations altogether. The fear of replicating that guilt I had, that embarrassment at causing that pain or using the incorrect expressions, meant that I no longer sort of engaged in those conversations. I took it as an easy way to opt out of those. And that's been a theme for my entire life. And it's something that as society matures, as we start this journey of healing, I've become more acutely aware. And I've decided more recently to just throw myself into it and to try and move forward and have these conversations. I've been incredibly fortunate recently to start an assignment as a part of my studies where we're supporting social enterprise. And for us, that includes working really closely with the most passionate, powerful Aboriginal spokesperson and founder that I could possibly hope to learn from. And it's been really heartwarming and encouraging to be involved in that process and to feel like my curiosity on the subject matter is sort of helping. And I hope to be able to sort of through that assignment and through these conversations contribute to the healing conversation that I'm learning so much about, the importance of it. I'd like to start my recording by acknowledging that it's being held on the lands of the Bunurong people, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional custodians. I would also like to pay my respect to their elders, past and present, and Aboriginal elders of their communities who may be here today. So thank you, as I said, for bearing with me on that. I'd like to now move forward into the more traditional starting of the episode, and I'm incredibly excited by this recording and this conversation that I had. And as you can see by where we've gone, it's been incredibly powerful for me. Today's episode is with a really special guest, Melia, who is a barrister doing some incredible work for some incredible people. And to me, there was one quote through this that absolutely resonated and one that I reflect on regularly for the many months since I recorded this. And that's, why would I want to do anything else? And to me, that is someone who has absolutely found their purpose, their reason for being and for working, and they understand what it is that they can contribute to this world. And the journey that she took there, the leap of faith that she made, and how close she came to not being there, I think is one that's incredibly powerful. And for anyone who's interested in this world that's keen to hear an incredible story. I really do believe that this is one that you'll get a lot out of, and I hope you enjoyed as much as I do. So let's jump straight into it. As I do with every episode, I just like to simply start with, introducing yourself and tell me, what is your job?
So my name is Melia Benn. I'm a barrister at law, and before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on the people of the Gimuy Wallabarri Yindinji people's land, and I acknowledge that they never ceded sovereignty. So I get to work in Gimuy. My family is actually Mamu Gunganji, and my ancestors come from Yarrabah and also around the Innisfail area around Cairns here. I am a barrister who has chambers in Cairns, and I also have chambers in Brisbane. But I consider my practice to be quite national, as I spend a lot of time in Western Australia and Northern Territory, as well as Cairns and Brisbane and other regional towns.
Very good. And what is the type of work you take on that has you travelling so far and representing so much country?
So I am briefed in a few different class actions. One, which we have in 2 different states, which is stolen wages, which is a class action that's been replicated from a successful settlement here in Queensland, where the amount that we settled on eventually was $190 million, and that is to recognise all of the stolen wages that were taken from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and they never got their pay. And we are doing the same thing in Western Australia and Northern Territory and eventually other states as well. So I go over to both of those states when COVID's not interrupting everything and sit on country taking statements and evidence from the old people.
Wow, that's incredible, and what an achievement you've made so far. Is that representative of what you were after at the time, or how does that pale into what was done, I guess?
When I went to law school, is that?
No, sorry, the case where you $190 million.
So I unfortunately wasn't at the private bar when that action started. I only got to be a part of it at the very tail end when the settlement was being administered, and my role in that particular case was to go out on country in Queensland, speak to mob about how the money was going to be divvied up between everyone, and get bank account details. And it's almost like a roadshow, and the court orders it, so you have to go out and explain to everyone in person what they've decided to settle on, because once they've signed up into this class action, they can't sue the government separately. So they all need to be a part, and we need some buy-in from them. Also, it's not something that we can just do like this on a video link, to a town hall in the middle of Kawanyama or something like that. You actually have to go out and speak to these people in person and show your respects in that way.
It must be an incredible privilege for you to be able to do that. Is it one of the highlights of the job to?
Yeah, I remember when I went to law school and stuff, I didn't even really know that this is something that I could do at the bar. And at the time of doing the bar practice course, I really was just doing the course to get it done and then to go back to the coroner's office and work there, have a couple of babies or something. But I met someone when I was at the bar practice course, and he introduced me to this line of work. And when he first, when I first came to the bar, I wasn't on the brief yet, but he invited me to a meeting at the solicitor's office, which was a meeting, I think there were about 10 elders there, all men, and all sitting around a table and including some people on the phone. And I was just observing that day. And Hans Pearson was our lead applicant in that matter. And so he was sitting in the middle of the table. Everyone is addressing him, and I got to meet all these amazing people who lived through, just the biggest, so much brutality by the effects of colonisation and the like. And so, he worked for 28 years and got, I think, £10 at the end of those years of being a stockman and working his guts out, thinking that at least one day when he finishes, he will get something for that, and he never did. So I'm sitting around these people who have just, lived the most incredible lives, really resilient, but yet still not bitter. These people are just so elegant, so beautifully spoken, and there's no yelling going on. No one's mad. Everyone is just looking for something to, come to peace with what happened to them. And after the meeting, I text Joshua Creamer, who had put me on to observe that day, and I texted him. I said, "Why would you want to do anything else? This has to be the best job ever. Like, just why would you want to do anything else?" And that's before I even went on country, So then you get the proper brief for the class actions that are just starting, going out to the middle of nowhere, places I've never heard before. Sitting on people's front lawns, recording their voices. And these people are old for Aboriginal people, they're the late 60s and 70s. That's super, super old for Aboriginal people. And just sitting around, and my specialty is speaking to Aboriginal women. So that's why they wanted me on these teams. Some of the things that they talked to me about in the way that they were treated or sexually assaulted and the like, it's not appropriate to be told to men. So I come along on these trips specifically to speak to women. So I'm sitting in there, on their front lawn with their best little blanket, and they think it's an honour for me to be at their house. But I'm sitting there thinking, I'd do this for free, if someone paid all my bills, I would do this for free because the honour is all mine. The privilege and honour is all mine.
That's incredible. And I as you're telling that story and that realization that as if you want to do anything else, that's a goosebump kind of realization, isn't it? It's just truly incredible. And I want to come back to that journey and what that looks like for you. And if I can just circle right back to, if you can talk us through some of the language. So, bar and chambers and, what that journey into looks like, I guess, would be really valuable.
Yeah, sure. I'll start from, the very start. So I went to university here in James Cook, locally in Cairns. We had, I think there was 80 people that started with us. Only 12 people actually ended up graduating. So it is a course where people start and, you drop off quite dramatically after the first semester. And I was very fortunate, though, that there's an Indigenous school, a really good one at James Cook. So I met some really lovely, older women who were, a year ahead of me or 2 years ahead. And I also was very fortunate to have a tutor who, sort of helped me through those times where you feel like you're actually not smart enough to do this degree, things like that, all that sort of imposter syndrome. But he was fourth year, so he was a really good mentor in that way. And then when I finished, at the time of uni, I was working at a law firm just as a secretary. And Cairns is really small, job opportunities are really tight, and there wasn't any room for me to become a lawyer with that firm. So I went and I was approached by another local firm to do conveyancing and sort of property law, and that was never going to be a passion of mine. I remember distinctly sitting in conveyancing as a subject thinking, I'm never going to do this. Like, I'm just going to pass this subject. I don't care. I'm not going to practice in it. And my very first job, I was conveyancing. Anyway, things like that happen for a reason, because whilst that wasn't the type of job I want to do, it still gave me really good skills that were transferable into other parts of the law that I ended up going into. So I did that for about 18 months, and I had always wanted to go to court. So when I was at uni, I always wanted to do an area of law where you go to court every day. And so I was speaking to a barrister here in Cairns that my mum knew, and he said, oh, look, you should try getting into the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, so the local prosecuting office for the state. You'll have to start as an entry level, but, you work your way up. So I went and had an interview for that job. And at the same time, another job came up. I went and did the interview for it and everything. And it was in a private firm doing litigation and insolvency. And so no court work, but the good thing about that job was that it was permanent. It paid really well for a young lawyer. And it was a solid solicitor job. It wasn't a clerk or anything like that. So I had to make a decision because I got offered both of those jobs, and I had to make a decision. Do I go with the job that I actually want to do, which is court work, criminal work, as a clerk, and earn less on a 3-month contract with no guarantees? With a
Wow, that's high risk.
yeah,
Yep.
and we hadn't actually bought a house at that time, but we were about to. So I knew I was about to have a mortgage for the very first time. So yeah, the best advice I was given about trying to make a decision for that was the barrister who, sort of lined up the job with the DPP. So he didn't want to influence me in any way, but he said, when you wake up in the morning tomorrow, when you have to make the decision, when you wake up, take the job of whichever job you thought of first when you woke up, because that's the job you really want to do. I woke up and I was like, oh, I want to go to court. I want to go to court. I want to do the DPP job. And so I took that job. And by chance, a woman she's actually a very good friend of mine. We went to uni together. We were sharing an office at the property law place. That other job was actually way more suited to her and the type of law that she wanted to do. So I put her name forward for the other job. And so she went and did that job. I went to the DPP. My contract was extended. The gamble paid off. But I just thought, and I still think all the time, that advice was just pure gold.
And essentially that advice was, you've got to do what you love doing. Follow your passion. Don't be swayed by the pay or other elements.
Yeah. And, so that was, 6 years ago now or something. But I always think when people come and ask me, oh, what should I do? They might be in a similar predicament. And life is short. Certainly I've had experiences this year that remind me of that. But life is also really long, and your work life is really long. So you should do things that make you happy, because when you do law, a lot of the content that we do is really heavy on your heart. It's quite traumatic. And if you're doing it and you don't like it, you're not going to be able to do it for very long, because you're not going to have anything to keep you powered. So you don't have that tank of passion to dip into when you're feeling really low or just needing a bit of a pep up or a reminder why you work so hard. So I think you're right. That's basically what that advice was.
And do you know what it was that attracted you to the courts? Why was it, or what was the burning inside you that said, I really want to go to court?
I love Jim Carrey, and this is like such a disappointing answer to that question, but he did that movie Liar Liar, and he was a family lawyer. And I just, I thought that movie was hilarious, but B, so interesting how, the part of going to court in that matter and having a client and dealing with all of that. And then in grade 5, I was at Gordon Vale Primary School up here in Cairns, and my teacher at the time, I don't know, I'm conspiring at this point, but I think he had this list of assessments to do very quickly in a day that he hadn't done in time for our report cards. And one of those was we had to sit around in a circle. He gave us a piece of paper, so we hadn't seen it before, and you had to read it out, and you were assessed on how you spoke and how you presented something in such a short amount of time. And so I just did that, and I got the highest mark you can get for that, and realised that that's something that I'm actually really good at, being able to pick up something and present it very quickly in a way that, having pauses in the right way, pronunciation of words and expression was something that I really excelled at. And, obviously at the time I wasn't thinking, oh, that must mean I'm going to be a lawyer. But I do think about that sometimes when I'm given a task like that and I'm doubting myself, and I think, no, this is something that I've been good at since I was a young child.
Yeah, that's an amazing realisation, and I really like that. So at what stage did the desire to become a lawyer manifest?
Yeah, so I always said, to Mum always tells the story. I always, got around saying I'm going to be a lawyer when I'm older. I'm going to be a lawyer when I'm older. But then in grade 11 and 12, I had a lot of stuff going on at home with my family, and I didn't enjoy school anymore. I wasn't. it wasn't something that I wanted to put or could put a lot of time and energy into. And I lost interest, but I still put on my preferences when you get your OP score and everything, that I would like to do law. And putting that to the side, I decided I kind of want to get away from Australia and Cairns and things for a little while. So my auntie at the time, she still is technically a Qantas flight attendant. And I thought, oh, well, I'm going to go do international flight attending and, see the world and live a little bit. And I had my forms filled out and all of that. But my mum and my stepdad at the time had broken up. And I have two younger siblings, one of which is 9 years younger than me. And mum was still studying to be a nurse at the time. So she would do prac during the day, work at night, or vice versa. So she needed me really. I had my license and stuff by that time. She needed me to be at home and to chip in with cooking dinners, picking up the kids from school and stuff like that. So the timing wasn't right for me to get away like I had wanted to, but it worked out because JCU, or James Cook, just randomly called me one day and said, this is like a year or two after school too, and said, you never followed through with your preference or your application. Whilst your OP has lapsed, you can do an arts degree. And then if you do well in your arts degree, you just transfer that over to a law degree and you won't have to do any extra time. So you should really think about giving that a go. And like I said, because I couldn't go overseas or anything like that, I thought, okay, well, fine, I'll go do this arts degree. And if I hate it, then, I hate it, I'll keep working. But if I like it, I'll do what I always said I was going to do and end up going to law school.
Wow, that's really interesting, and I'm sure you're not on your own there in the interest in flight attendants, and unfortunately or fortunately, I guess, for your customers or your clients now, that's not the way it played out. But I get a sense that you are someone who cares very deeply, and you sort of put your plans aside for your family, and you talked about the work you do, working with the Indigenous elders and hearing their stories, and you spoke about the fact that this work weighs heavy on a heart. How do you juggle that? I assume that for someone who does care deeply and is connected to people so closely, and this particular work you do, how does that play out for you?
It's really hard sometimes to keep your cup full. And it is important to be able to pour from a fuller cup than an empty one, because, your client, you're their only lawyer. They don't know that I have, 20 or 30 other clients. So each and every time you meet with those clients, you've got to be your best self and presenting in a way that makes them feel really seen and really heard. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to build relationships with them. So I have to be very careful about my mental health, and also just doing things that bring you joy, because if you're not doing that often enough, you will explode. That's proven to happen time and time again, and that would just be a waste, because, I'm only one of 2 Aboriginal women in Queensland who do this job. So if I'm not doing it, if I'm not there for Mob, and Evelina's the only person, or if Evelina's not there, then who's going to do this work, So I'm very conscious of the fact that I have to be really careful about that. And one of the ways I do that is, well, I did say earlier I had scheduled some days off, but that always changes. But maybe sometimes, like this morning, I didn't come to the office until 9 or something like that, because I had a late night at court. And that's the flexibility that comes with this job. But it's recognising that, it's okay to sleep until 7 a.m. You don't have to be waking up at 4:30, 5:30 every single day. And you can adjust your calendar accordingly to make sure you get at least a couple of hours here or there where you have a little bit of downtime. The other thing that I do is, obviously I go home to country when I can, because there is no replacing, there's no way of substituting being at home with Mob. There's no substituting putting your feet in the ocean and having those chats with people like that. But I don't get to go very often. it's hard to line up days, everyone's busy, things like that. But when I do get a chance, I only have a small backyard, but for me, having a little piece of land is still really magical. And if it's a nice day, and if I have time, I just get my towel or a picnic blanket, and I have two dogs, and I just lie down. You keep your phone and your iPods inside, and you just lie with your back on the earth, looking up to the sky. Remember that you're a part of something bigger, that you're not the most important person in the world. That day and time passes on with or without you, and there's something really re-energizing about having your back on land.
Yeah, I love it, and the imagery there. And I know in my life, I certainly don't take the time to do those kinds of things, and really appreciate what I do have, and just enjoy those elements. It's so easy to forget that, and to just get on with life without taking the time to do it. I'm interested now, and my mind kept drifting to it when you were looking at the DPP role, and you got the advice to what's the first thing you think about in the morning of those two roles. Where are you at now with that? What's the first thing that you think of each morning when you get up and start preparing for work?
I have a golden retriever puppy, so I don't get to have any sort of nice waking thoughts like that anymore. But, in saying that is even more beautiful, because, she doesn't care what I've got going on today. She just wants, my full attention and some breakfast. But as I'm going through the day, I spend a lot of time reflecting. I probably am an overthinker. You start thinking about your day. And for me, so for example, this morning, I thought a lot about my presentation last night. So, I'm quite a young practitioner. I'm the youngest person at the bar here in Cairns. And last night I did a presentation in front of all of my colleagues and solicitors who, some of them have been lawyers for longer than I've been alive. So I'm up there telling them how to speak to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, how to take instructions, trying not to sound like telling them how to suck eggs. So for me, it was reflecting this morning about how that went, reading emails or text messages with feedback about that. And then I started thinking about, how I was going to answer the questions for your podcast today, and discussing with my partner how, what we're going to do this afternoon. Are we going to take the dogs to the creek? And so all really, really normal stuff. I did also reflect this morning that last night we went for dinner after that presentation, because I presented with the first Aboriginal silk in Australia. His name's Tony McAvoy, SC. And after that, we went for dinner at a magistrate's house here in Cairns. Her name's Jackie Payne, and she was the first ever Indigenous magistrate to be appointed. So Tony's from Inala, I'm from Cairns, Jackie's from Mount Garnet. There was other Aboriginal barristers and solicitors with us, and we were sitting around a table in this, Jackie's got this most architecturally beautiful house, and we're all talking around, the table, and it felt really nice. We've all had really different lives, but regionally, and, don't come from very much, and yet we've all worked so hard. And I got to sit there around this room with all these amazing lawyers and, and a judicial officer, sitting there thinking oh, wow, I can't wait for the younger ones to come, and I want to invite them to my house and invite these other people as well, and for that table to just get bigger and bigger. So a big passion of mine is trying to get more Black lawyers on board, to spread the load, so I don't have to carry it. Me and Aveline don't have to carry it all, but particularly women, and just for people to see what they can be. I didn't know a lawyer. I certainly didn't know a Black lawyer when I was growing up. So I do think a lot and reflect a lot about how I can help, get more lawyers, bring them to the table.
I think that's an incredible cause, and we hear so often that you can only be what you can see.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering for you how that played out. You said at different times during your studies that imposter syndrome was there. Was that an element of this? And
it still is an element of this. Most places that I go to, they're the only Aboriginal person. So, there's not someone in Cairns that I can. Well, Jackie's here now. Magistrate Payne is here now, but I rely really heavily on my contacts and picking up the phone, and I lean on them quite a lot. But yeah, I didn't have that as a child. I did have a mother though who, she persevered regardless of everything that was thrown her way. So I guess in a way I could see that I could be whatever I wanted to be with that resilience that she taught me. I also, draw on the resilience of my old people and what they went through, but was still able to, despite all efforts to try and extinct us as a race, managed to have children, and then their children had children, and then I exist. So, I really am a product of two sides of families who can beat anything. And I draw on that quite often when I feel like I'm not going to be able to finish something, or I'm not going to be able to stand in front of those people. When you need to have a moment of reflection, you think, well, my grandparents would have loved to have had the opportunity to do this. So I have to do it, and I have to do it well to honour them.
Yeah. And I'm sitting here feeling all sorts of things that I wasn't expecting, honestly, at the start of this conversation. And I guess where I'm going here is I don't even know what my question is, other than to say that it feels like what you do is important, really important. And I think a lot of people aspire to do things that matter in this world in their careers, and very few find that. And I'm trying to work out for myself what it is that you're doing that is most important. Is it the court wins? Is it the role modelling?
It's never the court wins. It's never, because for me, if we're in court, we've already lost. Like if I'm in court representing an Aboriginal person and they're looking down the barrel going to jail, then society for me has already failed that human being. And yes, of course, we celebrate on the days that we get a really good result, and you have to celebrate that because, small wins are still wins, and it's a part of a bigger course, sure. But, for me, the way that I'll feel success is when I don't have to be explaining to my clients that, maybe it's not worth going to trial because juries are inherently racist. Maybe my measure of success will be where I can retire and I don't have to go to a talk every quarter to try and educate people on how to talk to mob. I don't want to limit myself in what the ultimate goal would be, and I've got to be very careful that there's a really big risk of tokenism or trying to elevate me and my colleagues. Maybe not when we're not quite ready, but just because you do need to normalise black faces in the judges, in the magistrates, and in positions of power. But for me, the important work really at this point is I might not be able to change the outcome, but I can at least make the experience for people the best that it can be, and in a way that they feel respected.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff. And when you were studying law, did you dream or imagine that it could lead to this, that it could be this powerful and this important to you?
No, because uni is such a slog, uni is just trying to get through it. I didn't have that sort of perspective back then. And it would be good to say that I did, and that's why I've, channeled all of that into this position that I'm in now. But things just happened along the way. It wasn't something that I was really purposely trying to do. I do things very purposely now, and, I've aligned myself with people that, make me realise my abilities and where I can make a difference and things like that. But during uni, it was really just trying to get it done, trying to get a job that paid well so that I could, help my family and things like that. But where it all really changed for me was when I went to the bar practice course and I met an Aboriginal barrister, and he completely opened my eyes to what and where I can make a difference. And some of the things he said to me was like, you got to think big to be big. don't always have to be a struggling black fella, which is what we put those ceilings on ourselves because you think, oh, that's, that's just how it's always been. That's what it's going to be like for me. But, he thinks at a different level, which is like, we need to be this big so that people can look above and say, right, that's what I want to be too. And then you can carve that path for them.
Do you feel like it's changing and it's having an impact? Are you seeing more black women want to become lawyers or follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, like I mean, doing talks or like, I did that SBS show and things like that. That takes so much of my personal time. I'm opening my heart to complete strangers, all for the hope that like just one little person out there, one little black kid in community sees it and goes, oh my gosh, if she did it, then I can do it. And then sometimes I think that's really indulgent. Maybe I shouldn't be so, think that I could have such a big impact. It's that real, trying to check yourself feeling. But then you get an email from, I got an email from a woman who's living in Canberra at the moment saying, oh, hi, I had always thought I'd eventually go to the bar, but I've just watched your SBS special and I've decided it is a matter of priority for me. I want to come to the bar now and I'm going to do the course in the next session. So that's it. That's it for me. It was worth all that time because if that gave that woman some strength and inspiration for her to go and make such a big move like that, those courses are 6 weeks long. You don't get any days off. I had to move to Brisbane. It cost a fortune. So they're not little decisions that people can just say, oh, I might just, oh, she did that, so I'll be able to do it. They're really big decisions. And if I was a part of pushing someone to actually take the step, then, it was all worth it.
Absolutely. And, hearing your story and your talk, I just encourage you to don't check yourself. Like it's going to make a difference. It's so powerful, and don't sell yourself short. Like it's incredible to hear. And I'm reluctant to do it, but I'll move on to the final 3 questions that I like to close out with and just explore relatively quickly. But is there anything you would do differently?
That's a really loaded question, I think, because I'm really happy where I am now, and I think that mistakes and at the time you think isn't the right decision, or sometimes you really want something, like you want it so bad and you're so disappointed when it doesn't happen. But then, 6 months later, you get this really amazing window into why you didn't get that. And maybe something better, more suited to you and your course was waiting. And that's why you couldn't be tied up in this other thing that you thought was, the be all and end all. So those questions are really difficult to answer without being honest with yourself. And really all of our experiences make up the person that you are. So probably no, probably I wouldn't.
Yeah, and it's an amazing thing that just because the journey's tricky at times or rough at times, once you get through those elements doesn't mean you would necessarily want to change them, because that's where you are now, and where you are now is a fairly incredible place.
Yeah, and you learn to pivot. So that's okay, you end up in a spot and you're like, well, this isn't what I wanted. But you become very resourceful, you pivot into another direction. And then when you sit back once you're there, you think, oh, wow, I wouldn't actually have wanted it any other way, because, it gave me skills along the way to deal with being disappointed. Like the world at any given time is going to disappoint you. And if you're not ready to turn that into something that you want, or to pivot into a different direction, then you're never going to grow. So I think it's really important to reflect on times you've been disappointed, and to measure yourself by the times you haven't been successful, and then how you dealt with that to come back from it too.
Awesome. It might be hard to answer, and I think we've touched on elements during our discussion, but any idea yet what's next for you?
I'll be a barrister, I think, for a long time. I do have plans to hopefully have kids one day, or maybe change. I already have been changing the type of laws that I do work in. So I used to do a lot of criminal defence, and I decided at the start of the year that I would like to, make that a smaller part of my practice and to do other areas. All of that takes time though. So, ultimately it would be good to have all of these class actions actually not being interrupted by COVID, and I could spend a lot of time on country and things like that. But I think, that's sort of the most exciting part about my job, and being an independent, a barrister at the private bar, I have a lot of variety and a lot of autonomy as to what sort of law I want to do. So I'll go with the flow as I develop my skills and see where that takes me.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And I'm sure you have so much of it, and for different groups of people and in different stages of their life. But final piece of advice that you would give someone?
Never sell your true self short. So if you want to be successful and you want to hold yourself out to be a certain way, make sure that you're always being your authentic self, because at the end of the day, you've got to live with you. People will come and go, and if you've portrayed yourself one way to one person and someone to the next, who are you really, and how can you expect other people to be authentic if you're not being authentic? And if all else fails, at least you are yourself. That's, I think, just being yourself, knowing yourself really well, and liking yourself and embracing all parts about you. And if people don't like it, that's fine. You can't be everyone's, cup of tea. But at least at the end of the day, you're going to bed saying, well, I was at least myself, and you can be pleased and proud of yourself.
Awesome. So I'd like to, wind up here and just sort of thank you again for making the time and sharing your story. It's so incredibly powerful, and I am sure it will impact all of our listeners as it has me. And I think what you're doing in your field of work is inspirational, and I hope it gets more coverage. It makes the change that you're hoping to make, and has a really material impact on the lives of everyone that you're working with. It's an incredible to be able to speak to you and to hear about it directly from you. And I'd like to thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for being patient with me trying to get this done. I'm sorry I've had to cancel a few times, but we got there eventually, so thank you for